Welcome to Dingo Reviews. This is Film Talk. This is our expanded segment, kind of a expansion of our film news where we talk about anything and everything film.
Yeah, Jer, so obviously no really good movies that we thought were out in theaters this week, so we didn't have any reviews to put up, so we thought we'd spend some time talking about some recent, pretty huge recent news here.
Yeah, this is big news for all the fans of Spider-Man. Disney, Marvel, and Sony have decided to go ahead and work together for this next movie.
Yeah, so if we remember, I talked about this before, but obviously there was a joint venture that Sony and Marvel had done for Spider-Man for the previous couple of films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So Spider-Man was part of 5 films. That was the original deal. He had 2 solo films and then was partnered up in 3 other films. If we remember, it was Captain America Civil War, Avengers Infinity War, and Avengers Endgame. And then, they had kind of gone on a break for a little bit. Everybody, Spider-Man Far From Home came out recently, and then everybody kind of thought that they were going to re-up the negotiations and do a new deal, and that kind of fell through. For whatever reason, those talks broke up. There was a huge kind of public release and press release that went out that they both chose their sides. And, at one point, Sony said that Kevin Feige was too busy to work on the next Spider-Man film. And I was kind of like, well, that's weird because he's just produced like 23 of the most successful films in the world.
You know what? That's interesting you bring that up because, we just talked about that he's signed on to do one Star Wars film.
Right.
I wonder, was that part of the negotiation to get this done?
Well, that's kind of funny that you bring that up, that you say that, right? Because literally the next day after his Star Wars deal was announced is when this Sony and Marvel Spider-Man deal they signed. So it's kind of like, did Disney and Marvel say like, hey, he's not too busy because we're going to make him do some Star Wars films. We're going to call your bluff. And then Sony's kind of like, that does not look good on our end. So let's get this deal done because now we kind of look like the bad guys almost, right? So, I don't know if the whole thing was kind of a public relations. Let's get as many people almost, kind of what is that old adage, like no news is bad news?
Yeah, I mean, it could also have just been sort of film politics, like,
right.
They're
Absolutely.
kind of fighting over this producer, sort of. Right?
Well, and, I think too, obviously Sony saw that their last film, Spider-Man Far From Home made over $1 billion. It's the highest grossing Spider-Man in history. It's made more than any other Spider-Man film before it. So Sony was probably, of course, like as any business, as any company would, I don't want to give away any more money than I have to, right? The original agreement was on the first 2 solo Spider-Man films, Marvel got 5% of the cut. So Sony's probably like, well, why don't we just produce our own Spider-Man movies, not give Marvel any of the cut, and we'll make all of our money back. They just saw how successful it was.
Yeah. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, but yeah, I was just thinking also, I think the reason this is all happening is that Tom Holland kind of ties the films together. He's probably the best Spider-Man we've had, right?
I would definitely agree with that. We look at Tobey Maguire. I'm not a huge fan of Tobey Maguire's interpretation of Spider-Man. Was not a huge fan of Andrew Garfield's interpretation either.
I don't think anybody liked his, really.
I mean, if you look at the Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2, those were not terribly well-made movies, in my opinion. And if we go back to Spider-Man 3 with Venom, and, you had Topher Grace playing Venom, I didn't like that rendition at all. I thought Spider-Man 3 was probably the worst out of all the Spider-Mans we've seen.
Oh, yeah, it was goofy. We had emo Spider-Man in
We did have, Spider-Man. He was dancing around. He was singing, Spider-Man 2, a lot of people consider that the top Spider-Man. Spider-Man 1, I wasn't, it looked back at it, and you got that nostalgic feeling, but it's kind of corny in its own end.
Yeah.
I think the last 2 Spider-Mans under MCU, I think they brought it all together. I really liked what they did with Homecoming. I liked the portrayal of Vulture. I liked the last one here, Far From Home. We had Mysterio in it. I thought those were both really well done as villains.
Let's not forget Into the Spider-Verse, too. That was so awesome for a cartoon.
It was. Now, that was, and I think that's where a lot of the deal thing came from, too, because that was a fully produced Sony film. So Marvel had nothing to do with that production. And I think so, what Sony probably saw is like, hey, we produced this really awesome Into the Spider-Verse. It won Academy Awards as the best animated feature. They had just gotten off Venom, which had brought in 800 million worldwide. So they're kind of like, hey, we just did a great Venom movie. And whether you liked it or not, it made a lot of money. We just did a great animated Spider-Verse film. You know, Sony's thinking over here, let's carry that forward. Well, let's bring Spider-Man back to us and put him in this other universe.
Yeah, it could be not just the money issue, but that they wanted more of the creative control without Disney interfering.
Absolutely. I personally think that, you know, as we just said, I think the two previous iterations under the MCU with Tom Holland, I think those are the best ones. So I think personally from a fan perspective that having Marvel involved really does justice to the character.
Yeah, and it integrates him with the whole universe and all of the awesome cameos. Speaking of which, this is going to be a 25% deal, right? Disney's going to invest 25% and they're going to get 25% back in profit.
Correct. So this new deal is for one solo film, so that'll wrap up kind of the trilogy that they've got going on. We've got Homecoming, we've got Far From Home, and then whatever this third film will be, you know, Spider-Man Comes Home. I don't know, whatever they're going to call it, right? And then, so it's the one solo, and then he's going to be in an additional MCU film in the future.
Right, a cameo or an appearance.
Cameo or appearance, and there's been no word on what that film will be. You know, there's been speculation that it might be the next Doctor Strange film. Some people are saying that'd be a great way for them to implement the multiverse because the next Doctor Strange film deals with that a lot. So it might be a good way to connect the Sony universe and the MCU together, if that's a thing. Those are obviously speculation and rumor right now. Other than that, I really don't know where else that they would put him in as far as a cameo, but I guess we'll see that when they've announced that.
Yeah, what I wonder is how effective are they going to make that cameo? Is it just going to be a highlight to get the fans in because they want to see Spider-Man, or is it actually going to serve the story?
Well, you know, and that's a good question, right? I think when he was in Civil War, his first appearance in the MCU, that was more than just a cameo. Like, he was in there for a good 15 minutes or so. Infinity War, he played an integral part. In Endgame, he was pretty much missing throughout the first, 2 hours of the film. He had been snapped. So yeah, I think the next appearance aside from his solo film will give him more than just a 5-minute cameo.
Okay, cool. And the projected release date for the film is going to be July 16th, 2021.
Right, so that'll be the solo film that'll complete the trilogy. Like you said, July 16th, 2021 is the release date. Sony and Marvel do like to release the Spider-Mans pretty much every 2 years. So we had one in 2017, we had one this year, 2019, the next one obviously 2021. And then another cool thing that we've kind of heard speculated and mentioned is now that with this deal kind of going forward, Tom Holland's Spider-Man might go into some of the Sony films. So we might see him pop up in the next Venom film. I know there's a Morbius film coming out, and Morbius is a vampire from the Marvel Comics that's starring Jared Leto. He might pop up in that film. So I think this is kind of both companies kind of playing nice with each other. Hey, we'll scratch your back. Let's, you scratch our back, and he can appear in multiple universes for the companies.
Okay, and I mean, if anything, it will probably serve the fans well because they'll get a little bit of that MCU flavor, a little bit of that more, I don't know if it's darker or maybe more artistically mature Sony flavor.
Yeah.
So it could be cool. Just real quick, why don't you remind us what happened in the last film with Mysterio and how everything went?
Yeah, so the last film, Far From Home, that just came out this year, that starred Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio. So he was, giving away some spoilers. So I'm definitely going to give out the spoiler warning for this. It has been out for a couple months. It's already on Blu-ray and DVD. So if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. But spoiler warning to make sure everybody's aware. Mysterio comes in. He kind of plays a mentor to begin with in the film of Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Obviously at this point in the timeline, Tony Stark and Iron Man have already passed away from the events that happened in Endgame. Mysterio kind of comes in and takes that mentor role that Iron Man had been doing previously. So he plays kind of a good guy to begin with. But then about halfway through the movie, we learn his true intentions, and he's actually the bad guy in the film. Mysterio, if you've read the comics, he is a master of illusion. So he doesn't have any actual superpowers, but everything he does is done with illusion. So in the film, he's actually using drones to create kind of these big monsters. We've got like elemental monsters, they call them. They've got like fire and water, but he uses drones to create these illusions. And then to make himself look like the good guy, he goes and fights these illusions and then shows that he's winning. And that's how he creates the illusion that he's actually the good guy. And then we learn that he's doing all of this to get some technology from Spider-Man that he needs to kind of go off and create bigger illusions and become more of a good guy in the perception that you will of the world.
So he's after fame.
Basically, yeah, that's essentially fame and money is what he's after. And that's pretty true to how his character played in the comics. Is he's kind of wants this fame that he's a real good guy, but he does all these illusions that aren't really happening just so everybody perceives him as the good guy.
Okay.
And then at the end of the film, of course, Spider-Man wins the day, wins the girl, but we have what we believe to be Mysterio dying at the end. And then, as we go in, obviously Marvel and MCU is very well known for their after credit scenes. So we have an after credit scene where Mysterio reveals Peter Parker, Spider-Man's identity to the whole world. So this is kind of where the breakdowns and talks for these two companies originally, I was kind of like, well, that's weird because we left off on a huge cliffhanger at the end of Far From Home, where now everybody knows who Peter Parker is. He's Spider-Man. Left off on that huge cliffhanger, and now the studios, at first we thought weren't going to do anything, and we're like, oh, what's going to happen for a third film? Now they've made up, and we can kind of deal with that fallout.
Yeah, it was kind of weird that they would have a cliffhanger and then just leave everybody with
right?
no answer.
Right, exactly. So that's where a lot of fans were kind of left wondering, like, got a huge cliffhanger, and now we have no idea what's going to happen because he's not part of the universe anymore. Thankfully, they were able to come to these negotiations, make amends. They've signed what sounds like a good deal for both companies. Mm-hmm. 25. I would feel if I'm putting 25% of the cost, then yeah, I should get 25% of the profits.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that works out in film math. Like, I'm not sure if that's actually a legit, equal. I mean, 25% of the profit could be 25% of $1 billion.
Right.
When they spent a couple $100 million,
Right. No, of course. But, I think for all of the fans involved, I think this is the best way to go.
Cool. And what villain would you like to see in this next film? I mean, if Mysterio is dead.
Oh, man, that's a good question. We've got a lot of villains to come from. I've heard a lot of talk around Kraven the Hunter.
I loved that character in the cartoon.
Okay, right.
Cartoon.
Absolutely. If fans remember back to Homecoming, there was an after credit scene at the end of Homecoming where they introduced the Chameleon.
Okay.
So that's potential as well. Obviously, Sony's already got their Venom out there with Tom Hardy. I don't know at this time if that's, from my understanding, he's not technically part of the MCU. He's got his own kind of universe off to there. So I don't know if Marvel would introduce a Venom character into the third one. Carnage was part of that Venom film as well, so I can't see Carnage coming in. Although I would love those two villains to show up. I think those are the best Spider-Man villains.
His arch nemesis is always Green Goblin and then the son of Green Goblin. Right?
Yeah. So there's Green Goblin. That's generally played by Harry Osborn. I don't know if they plan to bring him in. I have heard that what they'd like to do is kind of make him more of like a central figure throughout the whole universe. So kind of like how Thanos was throughout those, films, kind of make him like a central bad guy that everybody has to almost fight. But yeah, definitely Green Goblin. There's the Hobgoblin. There's just so many villains, but I think other things I've heard too, Kraven the Hunter kind of has some intersections with the Black Panther.
Okay.
So that could be a way to introduce that character through not only Spider-Man, but also Black Panther.
So maybe we'll see the Black Panther teaming up with Spider-Man.
Definitely could see that.
That'd be awesome. Black Panther is one of the most powerful characters at this point.
Right, definitely. And his movie's coming out the following year. So definitely, that could be a way to tie those two in. Again, rumors, speculations, we have no idea what's going to be announced for Spider-Man 3 at this point.
Cool. Well, I'm excited about it. I liked the first two Spider-Mans. I liked the first one of this new genre.
Yeah.
They keep rebooting them 3 times now.
Yes.
But yeah, we'll see what happens. It sounds cool. Do we have anything else on Spider-Man?
I think that pretty much covers most of the deal for the Spider-Man. Like I said, we got the one solo movie, the one appearance in another MCU film. Might make way for him to appear in some of the Sony films, so keep an eye on that. Other than that, I think that that pretty much covers all of the Spider-Man news over the past couple of weeks or so.
Yeah, I think overall, just for the film industry, it'll be interesting to see how deals like this work out very publicly for other franchises,
right?
Other movies and stories.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's cool to see two studios kind of, partnership like this to get, whether it be a character or maybe a film done. But it wouldn't be bad to see maybe some studios do more partnerships like this to where they can kind of co-produce and then get co-profits and that sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely sounds cool. We also have some upcoming October films. October is normally Halloween time, scary movies. Surprisingly, not a lot of movies coming out this October. We've got Zombieland 2. We're both big fans of Zombieland, or at least I was.
I love Zombieland. Woody Harrelson, you've got the great scene in there with Bill Murray.
Oh, yeah, I love that when they knock him out on accident.
I've actually got a bumper sticker of Bill Murray directly from that scene, so that is a good thing. There is another film coming out. It's more of a independent film, so maybe a lot of our viewers, listeners might not have heard of it. There's The Lighthouse.
Yeah, this is super exciting. When I saw the first stills, they were black and white, and the trailer looks super ominous, very dark.
Yeah, it's a horror movie. It's from the director who did The Witch a couple years ago, which I still actually have to check out. I've heard great things about that. But it is starring William Dafoe and Robert Pattinson. But like you said, Jared, looks very kind of ominous. It's got the black and white, so kind of a retro feel almost to it.
Yeah,
so,
and in the trailer, they're basically isolated in a lighthouse.
Yep, two characters isolated in a lighthouse. Looks to deal with a lot of maybe of their past, maybe what happened in their past, or digging up some things from their past that they don't want known. So we'll see how that works out.
Yeah, I really like this. I like that it definitely looks like a character study. It looks kind of violent.
A little bit.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it is, but
we'll see. We'll see.
Cool. And then I know that I'm not super excited about Terminator Dark Fate, but as someone who's a fan of the originals, I will probably see it. Comes out in November. You're going to catch this one, right?
I am going to catch this one. My fiance definitely wants to check it out. Like you said, Jer, fans of the originals. So I've seen all of them. I don't really think anything past 1 or 2 are really technically part of the timeline, if you will. There's 3. Didn't really enjoy that one much. There was obviously Salvation. That one was kind of a throwaway. Then they did that whole thing with Genesis where it was like they went back before the first Terminator and like redid the whole timeline. So I don't know. What I do know about Dark Fate is essentially from what James Cameron says, because he's now a producer on this one, is that those other 3, so it's essentially takes place after the second one.
Okay, cool. So they're scrapping all the other ones.
They're scrapping, so 1 and 2 are the only ones that essentially are prequels to this film. All the other ones do not count.
Cool. So everything that's canon is going to be James Cameron. He's going to be all involved.
So 1 and 2 are the only ones that are technically canon for this new film. 3, Salvation and Genesis, don't apply.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I will tell you one thing about this film. I am excited that I saw Arnold Schwarzenegger back in the preview. I am really hoping, though, that he is not a 2-minute cameo and that he is a central figure in the film.
Yeah, and Linda Hamilton's back. So Sarah Connor is back. I don't really know a whole bunch about the plot. Like, I can't really put too much together from the trailers. Other than that, obviously the Terminator from the future comes back again.
Right. Is Connor in this one?
John Connor, I've heard he's in it. Edward Furlong, who played John Connor in Terminator 2, I've seen that he is reprising his role. Again, I don't know. Same thing like you said about Arnold Schwarzenegger. I don't know if it's a cameo or if it's a significant role. But there is another main kid in it, and they've got to protect this new kid. So I don't know how John Connor plays into that.
Yeah, I kind of almost feel like they were just like, we don't know where to write John Connor in anymore, so we're going to put a new kid in. Same story.
Yeah. Now, another good thing, too, this is from the director who did Deadpool 1 and 2 recently.
That's really good news because Deadpool was amazing across the board.
Yeah. So good news on that. It is, again, produced by James Cameron, so obviously he had some significant effect and role on this film. So hopefully he kind of brings that element we had back from Terminator 1 and 2.
Yeah, speaking of James Cameron, when do you think Avatar 2 is going to come out, if ever?
Okay, so Avatar 2, if you've seen some of the recent release schedules from Disney now that they've taken over Fox, and
taken over the world.
Essentially, right? Yeah, so Avatar was a Fox film. They've got 2, 3, 4, and 5 scheduled, and they're on a biannual release schedule. So I believe Avatar 2 should be coming out in 2021, and then you got everyone after that on a 2-year schedule. So 2023, 2025, and 2027.
Yeah, it's interesting. They've been kind of quiet about it.
They have been, and I think, what are we? We're like, by 2021 will be 12 years after the original Avatar.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody's still on that Avatar hype train anymore.
I don't think they are. I think that they missed the opportunity to have a golden franchise.
Right. I think you're right. I think, Avatar, when it originally came out in 2009, it was the highest grossing film ever in the world.
Everybody loved the technology. It was amazing.
It had some of the best 3D technology at the time. That was a big selling point. I think now 12 years later, I don't know who's really interested in this anymore.
Yeah, what's interesting to me is that, for me personally, I wasn't that big into Avatar.
I wasn't either. I totally agree.
But I'm kind of interested in seeing number 2.
I'll check it out to see, the cool thing with James Cameron is it kind of reinvents stuff every release, right? Avatar obviously had a huge 3D he did this big spectacle when he released it. Mm-hmm. Titanic at the time was just this huge epic, and a lot of special effects at the time were new and inventive. Terminator 2, when that came out, it sweeped, I think, the Academy Awards for all the technical Oscars and everything.
Yeah, he's always on top of special effects. He's right up there with Peter Jackson in terms of that.
Yeah, so definitely it'll be interesting to see if he's kind of got another thing under, in his sleeve, another ace up his sleeve when Avatar 2 comes out. But then it's kind of okay, Avatar 2's out. How is he going to be able to top himself for Avatar 3? And then for Avatar 4 and Avatar, how does he keep topping himself?
I heard originally, and this was 12 years ago, that his plan was that Avatar 2 is going to explore the underwater portion of the planet.
Oh, interesting.
And that it's a completely different story. It has nothing to do with the original characters because it's all underwater. There's a different type of life down there.
Interesting.
That sounded cool because I know that James Cameron is obsessed with deep sea diving.
Absolutely, yes.
Ocean.
He's got a lot of documentaries on deep sea diving around the Titanic and everything. So I know, like you said, he is obsessed with that. I could definitely see how that could be kind of the plot for number 2. I have seen, along with the release schedule, they've got kind of the secondary names, how it's so it'll be Avatar 2 semicolon something. I'll have to check those out, but they kind of gave a headway into maybe where the plot would go.
Okay, cool. We'll have to look more into that because that's going to be exciting for a lot of people.
Yep.
And I would definitely think that if he goes with the undersea route, we're going to see a lot of Lovecraftian, Leviathan type creatures.
Well, and he's definitely got some directing experience in that. He did The Abyss back in the 80s.
Oh yeah, that was a great movie.
And that was all underwater. He actually created a whole new camera technique to film underwater for that film. So like I said, he's got a lot of technology behind him where he's introduced things and kind of moved cinema forward when he's released these movies. So it'll be interesting to see what he does with that.
Cool. Well, that is our film talk for the day. Don't forget to like and follow us on social media. We have our YouTube channel, and we also have our podcast. We're available on Spotify, iTunes, and Stitcher.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in.